Chapter 285. Kneel down. After saying that, Li Yuanba rose up in a violent rage and was about to rush out to look for the murderer. Yuanba, calm down. The head of the Li family hurriedly called out to him. After learning the facts, at this moment, he was rather calm instead. After all, he was the head of the family. He had gone through a lot of storms and waves, and he was also much more stable than Li Yuanba. To be able to kill 5 elders of their Li family in the imperial capital without caring, the murderer, whether it is strength or a background, I am afraid that it is not simple. Moreover, those 5 elders were killed right in the imperial capital, but they have not learnt the news yet, which again shows that the murderer is not simple. With the habit of caution cultivated over the years, the Li family head calmly said, "Yuanba, send someone to spy on the news first. Wait until we learn the identity of the murderer. Don't be impulsive and misuse the situation. Father, you are too cautious. Is there anything else in this imperial capital that our Li family needs to be afraid of?" Li Yuanba said with some displeasure at his words, his brows filled with arrogance. The Zhao family. In the face of Li Yuanba's inquiry, the Li family head only gently spat out 2 words. Li Yuanba's eyes shrunk at the words, and a figure that had made him fearful for his entire life instantly surfaced in his mind. The god of war, Zhao Wuji. If they were to say which power their Li family was still afraid of in the current imperial capital, then the only one left would be the Zhao family that possessed Zhao Wuji. Although Zhao Wuji had stayed in the battlefield of righteousness and evil since he had worshipped the heavenly Dao sect, Li Yuanba was very clear about how terrifying Zhao Wuji was. A genius who was able to reach the immortal punishment list in just 10 years was an existence that the entire cultivation world had to be concerned about. Although he, Li Yuanba, was proud of himself, he had to admit that he was inferior to Zhao Wuji. In fact, from the beginning of the Great Tang Kingdom, he had always been suppressed by Zhao Wuji. And up until now, he could only look up at the other party's back. The Zhao family with Zhao Wuji. Our Li family can't afford to mess with it for the time being. Unless there is a day when Chonjiao is able to surpass Zhao Wuji, that will be the time when our Li family will truly rise. The head of the Li family looked at the unsightly Li Yuanba and said in a deep voice, "By the way, father, is there still no news about cousin Chonjiao going to look for his cousin-in-law? A good big living person. How did he suddenly disappear in my Li family?" Speaking of Li Chonjiao, Li Yuanba could not help but frown and ask. When they came back 3 years ago, they suddenly realized that Li Chonjiao's wife, Wang Ting, had disappeared. And then Li Chonjiao went out to look for her under worry, and has not returned until now. However, what reassured them was that recently, news had come in that Li Chonjiao had frequented around Fengdu City. Don't mind this matter. Listening to Li Yuanba's inquiry, the head of the Li family suddenly changed his face. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He then said in a deep voice, "This is your cousin Chonjiao's family matter. Let him deal with it on his own. You just cultivate well, and strive to break through the outbreeding stage earlier, and become a true disciple of the heavenly Dao sect. Only then will you have the qualifications to fight with Zhao Wuji. HMPH, isn't that Wang Ting just an ordinary woman? What's there to hide? I'm going to go cultivate. Let me know as soon as you find out about the murderer." Li Yuanba snorted coldly at his words and turned to leave. He was very strange in his heart why every time he talked about Li Chonjiao's wife Wang Ting, his father's face would become very ugly. There seemed to be something important in this that he did not know. An ordinary woman. Oh, an ordinary woman who can fly a Tai Shang elder with a single palm strike. The Li family head looked at Li Yuanba's back and could not help but be filled with a bitter smile. 4 years ago, on a night when the moon was dark and the wind was high, a woman killed 3 Yuanying stage elders of the Li family, and even the Li family's supreme elder, who was blocking her, was sent flying by her palm strike. This matter was known to very few people because the battle was too fast at that time, and many of the Li family's children didn't even react before the battle was over. Even the head of the Li family only saw that woman rush out from Wang Ting's house, instantly killing the 3 Li family elders who had blocked her, and then sending the Li family's supreme elder flying, breaking through the air. That night, the head of the Li family checked Wang Ting's house, only to find that Wang Ting had disappeared. The Li family executives, who knew about this matter, were very shocked and puzzled. They could hardly believe that the so usually silent Wang Ting could be such a powerful and strong person. I'm afraid that the entire Great Tang country's lord would be nothing more than that. The head of the Li family knew the seriousness of the matter, and hurriedly blocked the news until Li Chunjiao came back to inform him of it, in order to prevent accidents. He didn't even tell Li Yuanba, causing Li Yuanba to be very strange all the time. Pass the order down. Immediately send people to spy on the news. Killing my Li family elders in broad daylight. The murderer is not sure of the Li family at all in his eyes. Humph. Retracting his mind, the Li family head droned at the 2 Li family disciples below. Yes. The 2 Li family sons immediately answered and retreated. In front of the imposing Li mansion, 2 uninvited guests were ushered in today. A purple-robed young man holding a bloody sword with a face full of murderous aura stood in front of the Li mansion, and beside him was a gold-robed young man whose body was full of ferocious aura. These 2 people stood very strongly in front of the Li mansion's gate, their whole body filled with murderous aura, and the passers-by on the side, even if they were more foolish, knew that these 2 people were here to look for trouble. Who are they? How dare they stand in front of the Li mansion? Do they not want to live? Why does that purple-robed youth look somewhat familiar to me? With the appearance of these 2 uninvited guests, in a short while, around the front of the Li mansion, a group of people had gathered in front of the door to stop and watch, everyone curious. Brother, should we fight our way in now? The gold-robed teenager asked. No need, we'll guard here, from today onwards, but anyone from the Li family, forbidden to go out, the purple-robed youth said in a cold voice. The 2 of them were none other than Kang Tian and Xiao Jin, and after some narration with Grandpa and the others, Kang Tian and Xiao Jin arrived directly in front of the Li family's gate. Hee, brother, you're treating others the way they treat you. Xiao Jin laughed at his words. Who are you people? How dare you block my Li mansion's gate? Looking for death. Not long after Kang Tian and Xiao Jin arrived, 4 Li family guards walked out from within the Li mansion's gate and drank ferociously at them. When Kang Tian heard the voice, he immediately had a cold light asterisk in his eyes, and his icy gaze swept towards these 4 guards. And instantly these 4 people felt their bodies trembling, their scalps sweating, and one by one they looked at Kang Tian in horror. Eyes that contained will could not be resisted by ordinary people. These 4 people were immediately shocked by Kang Tian's eyes, and fear could not help but surface in their hearts. Brother, just leave these losers to me. Xiao Jin's body rushed out and instantly kicked out 4 kicks towards those 4 guards. Each of the kicks did not contain a powerful force, but it was enough to heavily injure these 4 people. Bang, 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 bang. Those 4 people had already been shocked by Kang Tian's eyes. Now where were they able to resist Xiao Jin's kicks? Instantly, their bodies flew backwards into the Li mansion. Of course, even if they weren't shocked by Kang Tian's eyes, it was impossible for them to resist. After all, the difference in strength between them and Xiao Jin was too great. Hee, roll back and tell Li Yuanba that from today onwards, no one from the Li family is allowed to step out of the Li family, or else they will be killed without pardon. Xiao Jin laughed coldly at the 4 Li family guards who flew him backwards. He kicked with mercy and did not kill these 4 people. Wow, as Xiao Jin's words fell, the surroundings of the Li mansion were in an uproar. Everyone looked at Kang Tian and Xiao Jin with shocked faces, their hearts speculating, Who exactly are these two people? Surprisingly, they had such a big mouth. Nowadays, the Li family was so strong, and there was still someone who dared to make a loud noise in front of their door and speak out of turn. This made many of the people watching very surprised. These two people couldn't be crazy. But the hand of strength that Xiaojin showed just now was very powerful. It was hard for the crowd to believe that they were crazy. It seemed that something really big had happened this time. Overlord. That purple-robed youth is Overlord. I'm not blinking, am I? Suddenly, a cry of alarm rang out from the crowd, and the crowd looked back, but it was a middle-aged man looking at Kangchon, who was not far away, with a face full of astonishment, and his eyes full of shock. Buddy, you can't be mistaken, right? Is that really Overlord? Someone said skeptically. More than a decade had passed. The imperial capital had long since changed, and now, although many people in the imperial capital were aware of Kangchon's formidable reputation, very few had seen his true face. After all, back then, Kangchon had stayed in the imperial capital for a very short period of time, and had only shown his face when he fought with the Li family's seventh elder, and very few people had actually seen him. I'm sure I didn't misread it. I was watching from a short distance back then. During the Jidan stage heavenly tribulation that a Geman passed through, and his appearance hasn't changed at all. That middle-aged man said with certainty, excitement and thrill in his eyes. Heavens, it's really Hegemon. The Li family has put the Heavy Iron King under house arrest for the past 3 years. He's come back this time to take revenge. No wonder he dared to fight in front of the Li family's main gate. I haven't seen him for more than 10 years. He's still so domineering. Why else would he be called the Overlord? This time the Li family is not going to have a good time. It's hard to say. I heard that Li Yuanba's cultivation has already reached the peak of the 9th level of the Yuanying stage. And with the power of his talent, he can completely fight with the outbreathing stage ancestors. The crowd was in an uproar when they learnt of Kangchon's true identity, and then the discussion continued. Many people were filled with excitement. They knew that Kangchon would definitely not let go of the Li family when he returned this time, and there was bound to be a fierce fight between the two sides, which would stir up the entire imperial capital. At the same time, those 4 guards who had been kicked away by Xiaojin hurriedly went to report to the Li family head. What? Someone hit the door. After the Li family head heard the report from the 4 guards, his face was very ugly. He felt that today was an unlucky day. First he was killed by 5 Yuanying stage elders, and then someone dared to beat on their Li family's door. Since when was our Li family so good at bullying? The Li family head grimaced, then he asked, what is the cultivation level of those 2 people? The 4 guards couldn't help but look ashamed as they were kicked off in a single glance. So how could they tell the others' cultivation level? Forget it. You guys go down and inform Yuanba to come immediately. The Li family head took one look at their expressions and knew that it was a waste of time to ask. So he waved his hand and headed to the Li mansion's gate alone. The 4 guards hurriedly went to report Li Yuanba. At this moment, Kangchon had his sword in both hands and stood in front of the Li mansion gate with his eyes closed. His long hair was draped over his shoulders, and his purple robe danced in the wind, revealing an extraordinary aura. Xiaojin, on the other hand, moved one of the stone lions in front of the Li mansion's gate and sat on it with his thighs, driving his legs, staring at the Li mansion's gate with a sneer and waiting for the Li family's people to come out. They knew clearly that the Li family, who had been so humiliated, would never let up. The crowd in the distance was talking. They were still immersed in the shocking news of Kangchon's return, and all of them were excited. There were also some people who had gone to notify their friends and relatives, and it could be seen that more and more people were stopping to watch, gradually filling up the entire street. Even some Jidan stage cultivators had already flown their swords into the sky to watch. And this shocking news was still spreading rapidly amongst the imperial capital, as countless cultivators surged towards this place in shock. Crunch! The gate of the Li mansion was pushed open. Not long after, those 4 guards were kicked away by Xiaojin. The Li family head walked out from within the gate with a gloomy face, followed by a dozen guards beside him. Who dares to act recklessly in front of my Li family's gate? It's you. The Li family head first let out a furious shout, and when he saw Kang Tian, he froze, then exclaimed in shock,